Welcome back to Yang Daily. I'll be your host, Alex Cheney, bringing you all the Yang news you need to live your life right. 5 o'clock is the new, yesterday o'clock. Am I right, guys? Right? No? Okay, I know. I'm trying, I promise. Tell Trump to stop his dictator a day program or whatever he's got going on, because it's really got me backed up. Yes, it's another one of those rosy episodes, but we have good news as well. Shout out to our Tier 3 patrons, Peter Park and Shay Meehan, as well as all our other patrons. You are the UBI beneath my wings. So I apologize for what I have to tell you now. In Trump's latest dictator red flag, he is formally extorting states that do not follow his commands about how to run their own jurisdiction. The DOJ has declared New York City, Portland, and Seattle to be, quote, anarchist jurisdictions, end quote. The White House Budget Office says it will soon instruct federal agencies to defund the states. What funding would be cut is unspecified, but it is said to be scheduled to begin in less than 2 weeks. The memo also states that the list of cities eligible for defunding will be updated periodically, implying that any other city who disobeys could be on the chopping block next. To be clear, this is Trump using the federal government to extort states that refuse to do what he tells them within their own borders and having nothing to do with federal business. It is federal overreach of exactly the kind that the GOP has long professed to fear, yet which they are now committing. This is a massive undermining of states' rights and an attempt to coerce obedience, not to the law, but to Trump. If you don't believe me, have a look at the criteria the DOJ listed for whether a state will be declared to be in anarchy, which is a laughably inappropriate term, by the way. States in anarchy would not be paying federal taxes to support Republican welfare states, I assure you. The criteria are as follows. Quote, if a jurisdiction forbids the police force from intervening to restore order amid widespread or sustained violence or destruction, end quote. Vague enough that it could mean not gassing or beating protesters to the extent Trump would like. Quote, if a jurisdiction disempowers or defunds police departments, end quote. The executive branch of the federal government has no business telling states how to manage their police budgets. This is massive federal overreach. Quote, if a jurisdiction unreasonably refuses to accept offers of law enforcement assistance from the federal government, end quote. After seeing how Trump's intervention in Portland only inflamed the riots tenfold, refusing it is the only reasonable thing to do. The fact that Trump is trying to force this in other cities after it has proven to cause more violence, not less, is proof enough for me that more violence is Trump's goal. And the coup de grace, quote, any other related factors the Attorney General deems appropriate, end quote. I.e., they can make up any reason they want to cut off funding from states who are not obedient to Trump's every whim. This could not be any more blatant of a power grab, violation of states' rights, or violation of separation of powers. This is straight up loyalty to the dictator BS. And it's already worked on Washington, D.C.'s Mayor Bowser, whose city was initially on the list of targets but skirted at least the first round of cuts after caving to Trump in a recent phone call. Trump later reported on the call and noticed the wording here said, quote, she's willing to do whatever is necessary, end quote. This is the fall of democracy in real time, people. If you're not doing something to fight it, it may become your life's greatest regret. And despite their supposed values, Republican states are jumping on the authoritarian bandwagon. Florida's governor just proposed legislation that would defund cities which defund the police, as well as raising the penalty on participating in violent assemblies to a third-degree felony, destruction of public property to a second-degree felony, or to a third degree if in a group of 7 or more, obstructing roadways, upgraded to a third-degree felony, release drivers from any liability for running down protesters if they are, quote, fleeing from safety from a mob, end quote, makes it a first-degree misdemeanor to harass or intimidate anyone while in a disorderly assembly, attaches RICO liability to anyone who organizes or funds a disorderly assembly, applies a minimum mandatory sentence of 6 months in prison for striking an officer, removes eligibility for welfare benefits from anyone convicted of disorderly assembly. Do you see what's happening here? This law is designed to make anyone terrified of executing their constitutional right to protest. The definition of disorderly assembly will be vague enough to mean anything the police don't like. If you piss them off, even if you're only in a group where one person graffitied a wall or threw a water bottle at a police officer, you will all be thrown in prison for 6 months minimum on felony charges and left destitute on exit with no access to poverty relief. And that is if you don't get run over by any murderer in a car who can simply say they were afraid for their life, just like with the stand your ground gun laws. This law blatantly seeks to expunge the right to protest and is a massive green light to further police overreach. Matches up well with a long history of attacks on the right to vote. It continues to amaze me that a party which is so hostile to constitutional rights continues to get away with calling themselves conservative. Trump's rhetoric also continues to grow more exaggerated and blatantly fearmongering. In a recent tweet, he said, quote, "If Biden wins, China wins. If Biden wins, the mob wins. If Biden wins, the rioters, anarchists, arsonists, and flag burners win. I am running for re-election to bring jobs and factories back to Wisconsin, to put violent criminals behind bars, and to ensure the future belongs to America, not China, because if we win, America wins. We built the greatest economy in the history of the world, and now we are doing it again." End quote. This is what it looks like when a budding dictator needs to create a radical enemy to justify his own radical fascism, fear-mongering, turning Americans against one another, and let's not forget, lying. Never mind that Biden has more universally condemned violence than Trump has, and that Biden has a strict record on crime, but also a policy platform that actually addresses the causes of crime rather than relying on oppression. Never mind that Trump has failed to bring back jobs to the Rust Belt. Never mind that Trump does not put criminals behind bars, he puts them in his administration, having employed more criminals than any other president in history, to my knowledge. Never mind that he did not build the greatest economy, he took Obama's economy, coasted on it, and then destroyed it, first with a trade war and then by sabotaging our pandemic response, leaving us one of very few nations in the world unable to contain the virus, unable to fully reopen for business. Hundreds of thousands of preventable deaths, an economy in ruins, rioting in the streets, record high depression, number one in declining quality of life. That is Trump's America. On a happier note, last year, UBI didn't register as an issue in the federal election in Canada. Now, according to Ipsos Canada, 17% of Canadians don't just think UBI is a good idea, they think it should be number one priority for the federal government. That compares to 33% who want the priority to be health measures to fight the pandemic, and 26% who want it to be getting people back to work. The irony, of course, is that UBI would do both of those things as well. This is incredibly swift progress for UBI, and great to hear. More locally, David Kim's campaign announced the other day that it will launch the first ever UBI trial in LA, granted an extremely brief one. The campaign has selected 25 families who have lost at least 50% of their income since the beginning of the pandemic and have immediate need for funds for basic necessities to receive direct cash payments through November. The funds are provided by Steady, a technology company that finds workers jobs, helps them manage personal finance, and increase their income. It would be fair to say that this is a publicity stunt, but it would also be fair to say that this money is going to do a lot more good for people than ads ever have, and it does demonstrate his policy. You'll rarely go wrong copying Yang's ideas. Speaking of, many David Kim supporters are reporting that he is being pointedly blacked out by local media. We're being asked to blast local news stations and the personal Twitters of anchors until they cover his campaign, specifically Alex Michelson and Fox 11 Los Angeles. We've seen this before and overcome it for Yang. Time for a throwback session of Media Blitz, gang. More good congressional news. Recent polls show that Humanity First endorsed candidates Dr. Al Gross and Jamie Harrison are both tied with their Republican incumbents. Getting rid of Lindsey Graham would be a godsend, and Al may be the only independent who's got a shot at unseating a senator, so here's your chance to get someone outside of the duopoly into power. Both are amazing candidates. Also, Georgia's John Ossoff, Iowa's Teresa Greenfield, Kansas' Barbara Bollier, Maine's Sarah Gideon, Arizona's Mark Kelly, Mississippi's Mike Espy, Montana's Steve Bullock, North Carolina's Cal Cunningham, and Texas' MJ Hagar all have a real shot at winning their races against Republicans. Remember how important it is to flip the Senate. Nothing will get done if McConnell is allowed to subvert democracy by denying votes on bills, and Republican senators have already given their allegiance to Trump over country. These races are vital, each and every one. Pick your favorite candidate and donate or volunteer to make a difference. Finally, awesome news for Donna today. She picked up an endorsement from Bernie. This extends her previous presidential candidate endorsements from Yang, Warren, Julian, and Beto. Quite the collection. The gang is trending hashtag Vote for Donna today in celebration. Join us. Also, if you're a Tesla fanboy, it's Battery Day. And that'll do it for today's Yang Daily. Share and bookmark the extortion thread, anti-protest thread, Kim's UBI, the Senate races thread, and Donna's endorsement. Help trend hashtag Vote for Donna. Help recruit other organizations to the cause and get everyone to sign the UBI petition. Flood Congress and Trump with calls, tweets, and letters using the Resist Bot or Income Movement easy contacts below. If you need help, consult Humanity Forward, the Income Movement Aid Database, the Mission Asset Fund, United Way, or the H3 podcast thread. And don't forget to Yang Daily.